Welcome to The Friday Habit with Marc Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learn to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday. Okay, hey, welcome to another Friday Habit. This is actually a special episode because we have someone here in studio live. So we've been doing this show for 4 years, and I think all of them have been virtual. And today we have a great guest, Karen O'Keefe. And she is a small business owner and an entrepreneur. And her and I met at a networking group. And I heard a little bit of her story. And she has cool glasses. And so I thought it would be great to just kind of talk about her journey and how she got to where she is, and offer some encouragement to some other new entrepreneurs and business owners. So, Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah.
I feel honored being in the studio.
So tell us a little bit about your journey of just how you grew up and kind of like your first career.
Oh, boy. My first
and even if you didn't have a career, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you're just taking care of kids. That's a career.
Oh, I had a first career. It was as a brand ambassador for a marketing company, and it was when sampling very first began. Okay. And I worked for Coca-Cola handing out cans of Fresca at big events.
Oh, let's go.
So
this is before Fresca was like the bomb, like everyone knew about it.
Right.
I love Fresca.
I do
It was
too.
like the drink of the 90s. It's like so refreshing.
Yes, exactly.
I think I have some in my fridge here at the office because whenever you just want that, light, bubbly, refreshing drink. Yeah.
So we would stand outside of major events like concerts and football games and stuff like that and just hand them out as people were leaving. But it was really interesting because of the fact that it was such a new industry. It was such a hard sales pitch to get the venues to agree that this would be a beneficial thing for them, for people to be excited as they left, getting something free. So it was an interesting journey, and I traveled the country doing that, and then I traveled the country doing craisins when those were introduced.
Oh, craisins.
And we did Nestle Quick, we did Guinness in art galleries, we just did all these really fun things. And so we would get invited to all these really crazy special events, like at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Indy 500 and, all these really great things that we got to participate in. So that was a great way to start my career.
Yeah. So how did you, did you go to college and do marketing and then decide?
I have an art degree.
Okay.
Had I known then what I know now, I definitely would have gone into marketing. I'm good at it. It just makes sense to me. But on a small scale, because I don't have that education. You know, I know what I know, and
and nowadays, does education? How much does it really matter?
I agree.
You can learn so many things online, and there's so many courses, and just ways so you can, if you're motivated, you can self-teach yourself and that's how my
current industry is.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as like a license. It's not like a regular craftsman, like a plumber or an electrician. There's no license, so anybody can hang a shingle as a move manager or an organizer. So it's up to you to go out and get those certifications and that knowledge, and then try and sell yourself on the fact that you have that.
Yeah. So you're traveling, pushing all the Crystal Pepsi. I don't know if that was.
No, thank goodness. That would have been a tough sell.
Yeah, exactly. It's cola, but it's clear.
And it tastes horrible. Enjoy.
Yeah. Man, there were so many good throwbacks from. I remember OK Soda and Surge. I don't know if you remember those.
Oh, we
two.
did Surge.
Yeah, Surge.
Yeah,
okay,
in Portland.
Yeah. It's like a Mountain Dew alternative,
Yes, it was highly caffeinated.
Yeah. Oh, I had a friend in high school that for breakfast he would eat a Snickers bar and drink a Surge.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, he was pretty unhealthy.
Yeah, did he live to tell?
I don't know. I need to find out.
Oh, my gosh, that's horrible.
Yeah. So from kind of growing up, were your parents entrepreneurs, or were you involved in people who kind of did their own thing?
No,
or okay,
not at all.
very like go to college, get an education,
Yeah.
get a job, work for 30 years, and
I
retire.
actually am a first-gen graduate from college.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. So it wasn't like a huge push for us to go to college. I kind of just didn't know what else to do. Like I really didn't have a plan. I barely got out of high school. Like it just wasn't. I just honestly didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know myself very well. It took a long time for me to figure out who I really am. I was probably, in my 40s, which is a lot later than most people do that. I think women do it later than men do, but...
You think that's just because societal pressures of certain expectations that get put on women, or like men, there's typically like a clear path of,
Yeah, a clear path of growth. I always joke with my husband that he has all these certificates on the wall, and it's so hard for women to get anything like that because we're busy raising kids. We're just on this other course that God has created for us, and it's just kind of a natural thing. But I had a lot of years where I wasn't in the workforce, not necessarily by choice, but my daughter had a lot of health issues. I had a lot of health issues, and so our lives adjusted to take care of what our priorities were. And so I did kind of become entrepreneurial on my own, doing little tiny businesses out of the house. Like the most successful one I had, I was the box boss, and I would go around on the weekends and get free boxes off of Craigslist. Or one time Public Storage was closing, and I went and bought all the boxes they had and filled them up in the garage all the way to the ceiling, and then I would just sell them.
Really?
Yeah, I had a price list. I was very successful at it.
That's
and it was
awesome.
I had to bring money in. My daughter had a brain injury and couldn't leave the family room, and so the family room's connected to the garage.
Yeah. You're like, okay, it's easy. I can get people to come, buy a bunch of boxes.
Yeah. It was really a good way to start understanding how to be an entrepreneur. But that leap between just selling junk out of the garage to actually owning a business was so huge for me because my dad was a machinist. My mom worked in an office. It wasn't something that was natural to me. It was something that I always admired, people that had stepped out and done this on their own. It was almost like they were on a pedestal to me. I was just so impressed with the concept. So when I started to actually be a little bit successful at this, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on the pedestal.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you really didn't have a blueprint of how to do something, and I think a lot of people, right? It's like, when you're in the grind and you're working a day job and this idea of like passive income or be your own boss and have autonomy and freedom, it's like you think about all these things and it's like, oh, wow, that's what I want, But then a lot of times on the flip side of that, and I think it really just depends on your mindset and how you initially go into things. When I started my journey, I don't know if I was just stupid or naive, but I was just extremely positive and always tried to see the good in every situation, no matter if things were going good or bad. I was always...
But that's who you are as a person, and that carries over, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, but I guess what I would do is I would encourage people, because I've met some people who they're kind of the glass is half empty, and then they're entrepreneuring or doing business. Just, oh, it's such a drag. It's so hard. It's like, everything's a roadblock or a hurdle, and I'm always like, oh man. And a lot of times, even in networking groups, and when I go places and say, oh, I own my own company, and whatever, they're like, oh my god, it's just like, oh, this sounds terrible. And so I in some ways I'm like,
some days it totally
is. Some days it is, but I think the good outweighs the bad overall.
Absolutely.
And there is that sense of am I like working for money, or is money working for me? And am I helping build someone else's dreams, or am I building my dreams? And I think that's kind of what it comes down to, for me at least. There's this sense of the only person holding me back is myself, right? Like I can be as successful as I choose to be, and as much work and effort I put into something, I can get the results from that. And so I think there's an element I like that.
In theory.
Yes.
I mean, it depends. Yeah. But there's a lot of effort that you put into things that don't pay off and don't go into come into fruition.
Yeah.
And because those are the wrong things, I think in the beginning of entrepreneurship, what I've learned is you got to focus I keep hearing that over and over again, because when I started, I was, like anybody else, you take money any way you can get. And I took every job that ever got offered to me, regardless of how horrible or focused it was on, the final goal. But honestly, I don't think I knew what the final goal was.
Yeah.
So for this first
And do
year,
we still know what the final goal is? I mean,
no.
For me, I feel like I'm still trying to think like, all right, now what? Like what's next, And I think there's an element of that.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And it just keeps turning and twisting. What I have figured out recently, though, is that I should be working with widows. And that just keeps coming up, that, we're supposed to take care of the widows. And I have a lot of them. It's funny, I have 5 of them that I see regularly, and it's just 3 hours of sitting down and helping them very personally and individually go through what they need to shed in their lives that they've collected for decades,
Yeah.
And most of my competitors in the field will send a big team in, clean out a house, do the decluttering for the people, which doesn't always work, because how do I know what's important to somebody?
Right.
And so I think that's where I have an edge, is that I have figured out that I'm really good at the one-on-one, and I understand. I'm getting old enough to understand what they're going through. I don't have that life experience,
right,
but I'm getting closer.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's riches in the niches, they say.
Yeah.
And so the deeper you can niche, the more successful you can kind of be.
Yeah.
So you go from selling boxes out of your garage, the box boss. Which is
my
great.
nickname my husband gave me.
Yeah,
But
I think it's good.
It was appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of out of a necessity, you're kind of doing side hustles and things like that in order to kind of bring money in and help the family out, and so that you can be home with your daughter and yourself. And what was the next phase of you? Was it going into the organization thing, or?
No, I was a substitute teacher for 10 years.
Okay, so you got into substitute teaching, which also is flexible, and you
yes.
kind of choose when to take jobs and not. And
yeah, and I think it was good for me because I was very uncomfortable standing up in front of a group of people when all that started. But by the end of it, you're in front of 30 kids all the time. In high school, kids are a rough audience. So
they could be jerks.
yeah. But I learned how to earn their respect. And the most rewarding part of that is when I'm out in public. Even still, I haven't done it for probably 3 years, not too long after COVID, I gave it up. I still have kids that I substitute taught that'll come up and know me by name, introduce me to their parents, or give me a free dessert at the restaurant. Like, this is such an honor that I impacted these kids in a positive way instead of the stereotypical, sub scenario.
Yeah.
So that was really beneficial.
Or the jerk teacher that we all remember.
Right, yeah. Because I would focus on building relationships with the kids that I saw over and over again. And a lot of the outliers, as an adult, it's easy to become friends with the outliers. It's not so easy when you're in high school and you're in the thick of it.
Right.
But those are the kids that need the attention the most.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to give it to them.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's awesome. So then you give up substitute teaching. You retire.
I gave it up.
No, please don't.
You know why I quit? One day, one of my students pointed out that he just started a job at McDonald's as was making more money per hour than I was.
You're like,
I was like, okay,
ouch.
I'm done.
Yeah, maybe I go to McDonald's too.
I know, right?
Chick-fil-A is like $21 an hour. You're like, yeah, but then you got to be frying chicken all day and.
Well. Except for I'd be managing it,
Oh,
so I'd be making $100,000 a year.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So then you're like, wait a second, there's got to be more. I got to be able to receive more for my time that I'm putting into.
Yes, and
all
I had
this
no
stuff.
idea what that was going to be, but my kids were graduating from high school, going to college. It was that time frame. And all my friends were like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what I want to do. I'm going to dive into learning this new career, and I'm going to kill it. And they are. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was just kind of floundering and praying and praying and praying.
Yeah.
Like, please, what the heck am I
what
doing?
What am I supposed to do?
And so I started working for a family that was quite large, had a lot of homes, and they had me doing a lot of organizing, move management sorts of things. And I was making X number of dollars and wanted $5 an hour more and was afraid to ask because I thought I would lose my job and I couldn't afford to lose it.
That's the worst. I hate that.
It was horrible.
You know, when you feel like, okay, I'm doing really good, I'm proving my value, and then it's like when someone's like, no, or you feel insecure to ask.
Yeah.
It's kind of like,
yeah. And I knew that the skills that I was offering them were worth way more. If they were to bring in an independent contractor or somebody to do it, they'd be getting 3 times the money.
Right.
And I thought, this is ridiculous. And at the same time, I was listening to a lot of books that were really encouraging me about my worth, my self-worth, my value, my not just my self-esteem, but really my value and what I bring to the whole as a person. And listening to success stories of other women that started, you know, essentially where I did and made it really big. And I thought, this is crazy. Why am I limiting myself, you know? And so fortunately, I have a very supportive husband. I keep waiting for the day he's going to say, go get a job. Like, we got to pay a bill.
Yeah.
But he's super cool about it. And so I've just been on this slow journey since that idea really percolated.
Yeah. And so when we met last year, you were kind of, you had the idea and you were just kind of doing some side projects and kind of building your business and stuff like that. What were some of the things that when you really decided to go all in, you know, and like make something, what were some of the things that you like that were maybe easier than you thought they were or more difficult than you thought they were, as far as like, you know, starting an LLC or do an S corp or a sole proprietor? Like, did you start looking into some of those things as far as, you know, what kind of business you were going to start, and
I didn't,
like a website and like, you know, all that kind of stuff? It was like, here's my Venmo. Like, you know,
it was just trial and error. Like we started this on $100 budget. So I have just been teaching myself as I go along. And to be, you know, I had 13 years where I never really needed to use a computer for business at all. That's a long time in the tech
it's
world.
Changed a lot in 13 years.
So it was really hard to kind of catch up with that gap. And I'm doing fairly well with that aspect of it. But as my business grows, I'm finally getting to the point where I'm like, I can't build a successful website. I can build a basic website, but it looks kind of not very impressive. You know, so I'm starting to be able to hire out for a couple of things and get that going. And I didn't know what kind of business to start in the beginning. My brother has started a couple of small businesses, and he's just always had an LLC. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. He's smart. I'll follow what he did. So there really was no like intentional decision on any of that. But to answer your question about what was easier than I thought it was going to be was networking. I was terrified the first time I had to go into a networking thing. And I did my makeup, I did my hair, I overanalyzed what I was going to wear, like the whole thing. And I pulled up and sat in my car and I called my daughter and I said, you have got to talk me up, girl. I love my daughter. She's amazing. And she's like my best friend, and she tells everybody that I'm her best friend. She's the coolest.
That's great.
Yeah. And I knew she's like my biggest cheerleader. She's awesome. Yeah. So she gave me this little pep talk, and I took a deep breath and I walked in and I was like, okay, this isn't super horrible, but I don't enjoy it. And it's just gotten easier and easier, fortunately, because my business is hugely based on networking. And so I'm starting to figure out exactly which networking groups to go to, who to talk to specifically. And it's really starting to pay off.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think it's an important thing to remember that, especially in the beginning, I feel like, right? Like, you don't have thousands of dollars to do digital ads so that when someone Googles, you know, home organization or elderly care, widow care, whatever that might be, right? Like, you don't have the money to like do the digital advertising piece of it. So
no, and I don't know how to build SEO.
Right.
I know the term.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's an element of like in the very beginning, and I always tell people you should work for cheap or free and start to meet as many people as you possibly can, because through those networks you'll start to build relationships and then get business. And even for us, you know, we're going on 9 years, officially 10 since I started Brand Viva this January, and everything we've done has been via word of mouth and through relationships. And I can point back to all of our clients and say like, okay, this person came from this person or this job I worked. And, so it's just very important, I think, to kind of, put yourself out there and put yourself in a position to receive, I said the blessing, it's like, expect the blessing. And it's like sometimes you just need to get off the couch and take your idea out to the public and then start to meet other people. And then like kind of you found, right? People are, hey, what do you do? And it's like, oh, this is what I do. Oh, that's interesting. And, I know somebody who could probably, use your services or whatever that might be, so.
Well, and it's interesting because a piece of advice that somebody very smart gave me early on was, as you come out of each job, sit down and write out, while you're still in your car, write out kind of what you did and how you feel. What emotion are you feeling right now? Are you feeling euphoric? Are you content? Are you miserable? Are you grumpy? Like anything that you're feeling, and then go back through that list and see which ones made you feel those positive emotions and focus on those and eliminate all the kinds of jobs that bring you down. And that was a really good starting point. It really helped me figure out which direction to go. And then it allowed me to start to feel like I don't have to take every job. Because if it's a negative situation, it's not building in a positive direction. So the other thing that this same brilliant woman taught me is that God puts a desire in your heart. You don't have any control over what that desire is. I don't choose my desires and my passions. That's part of who I am.
Yeah.
So it's just my job to make those things happen.
Yeah.
Or choose to ignore them and be miserable. That's up to me. You know, everybody gets to make that choice.
Yeah.
But I don't choose the passions of my heart. Those are provided for me.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of along the same lines of the first thing that I said, but it's really just figuring out what makes you happy, because that is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, my husband was, he went to college for business, not because he wanted to. He wanted to go for education, and his dad said, I'm not going to pay for you to go to college to get a career that you can't support a family with. So he went for business. He was in the business world for years, miserably failing, getting fired, getting laid off. It was like beating his head against a wall, and it was so hard on our family because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. It wasn't the passion of his heart. So he quit and went back to school, and it changed our whole family. It changed the world for us, for him to go into education.
And he loves it?
He loves it, and his students love him. He's that teacher that, the kids just will remember forever. His students from 5 years ago will still come to our house and bring Christmas presents.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really
it's
cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that point about kind of documenting how you're feeling after a certain thing. I think that's something I've thought about more recently. Because as everybody, it's like I have great days and I have not so good days, or days that feel like I didn't do anything or accomplish anything or feel drained, And so there's an element of thinking of all right, what on those days that I feel energized and like so happy for life and excited about the work I'm doing, or man, the day's over and I'm ready to, move on from the day, but I want to work a little bit more because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Yeah, I think it's important if you can start documenting some of that stuff and starting to see a pattern of, and I think there's a lot of apps too out there that ask you like, how was your day? Like, how do you feel about your day?
Yeah.
But I think really trying to take stock in like, why did I feel great today? Like, what made me feel good? And then trying to push into that and do that. And I think with anything, especially as you're starting a business, when I started Brand Viva, I would do anything that would make a buck, if I'm designing business cards, making a flyer, shooting a wedding, shooting a high school portrait, doing video for, a small business, doing video for someone's funeral, like whatever it was, I was like, all right, I'm just going to do work. But then again, as I kind of continue to grow and realize like, man, I really don't like doing weddings. I really don't like, filming a funeral or, like whatever it might be. And it's like, okay, let me push more into the things I like to do. And then I think I was blessed enough to start receiving work that I really enjoyed, and then I could say no to things when they came to me like, hey, will you shoot this thing? No, I don't have to do that. And so I'm going to push more into the things that I want to do. And so, so I think that's really cool.
You can't even market directly to those things until you figure out what they are.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I mean, there is a bit of this where you just have to be in a spin cycle.
Yeah.
Just figuring it out a little bit.
Yeah, and I think
first business.
Yes,
sure,
and I think all those things grow you and educate you and help you learn.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And every year that goes by, it's like, okay, we push a little bit more into certain things. Earlier on, I think we did a lot of different stuff, kind of the jack of all trades. And then now, over the past few years, we've really focused in on podcasting, video content, and like headshot photography. Like those are kind of our three main things that we do. But like you said, I mean, it took years of just kind of doing a little bit of everything to kind of figure out, okay, what it is, that I really want to do. So what do you say?
And to get past the imposter syndrome.
Yes, that's a big thing too.
Yeah.
Did you feel a little bit? I feel like when we first met, there was a little insecurity from you.
Oh my
about
gosh.
it's like, hey, you got this, But there was like,
I'm a different person.
Yeah.
I really am a different person. But when we started going to that network group, the thing that really struck me the most is it was almost all men. They were all pretty successful guys.
Yeah.
And a couple of women that sat in the back that weren't dressed professionally, that were just kind of not participating. And I was like, if I'm going to show up, show up.
Yeah.
So I started, dressing better, sitting front and center, joining the conversations, and I felt like I was the only woman doing that. And I feel like that's evolved just a little bit because I've spoken to the other women and we're like, we got to step it up. But
because everyone has something good to offer, right? Like
everybody.
We all have, male or female, whatever it is, like everyone has life experiences that make them unique to who they are and bring something special to the table. And so it's like, like share your voice. I want to hear, what you're doing. So let's talk a little bit about kind of this transition. I know you've kind of gone from, organizing, and then, you're talking about maybe an app, and now you're saying widow care, and, all these other kind of things. So you're kind of in this phase of kind of discovering what you are passionate about, what brings you energy, and what you're doing. How has that kind of shifted for you over the past year or so?
When I started on this, I thought I was just going to continue down the road of working for wealthy people and making things look pretty. And then I realized there's no reward in that at all.
Yeah.
Any
little superficial.
Organizer can do that. Yeah. And there are a lot of people in my industry that are hobbyists. They just want to do this on the weekends for a little extra cash.
They love making sure all the colors are lined up perfectly and all the jars fit in the pantry.
The labels,
and
shopping for the bins. Like, that is so not me. And I can do it. I'm
right. You're good at it.
I have,
you got the eye.
Yeah. Yes, I do. I have an art degree. And I think that's another thing that sets me apart from my competition is that I really do have the eye.
Right.
But what I'm figuring out is somehow I have gone from being raised by a machinist and an office manager. Still, I have this depth of understanding of what things are called, the value of things. I understand art. I understand cars. I understand things that people with more money have. I don't know why. I don't know how I accumulated this knowledge, but it was part of the master plan, apparently.
Yeah.
So as I figured that out, I realized that I can move. And okay, there's a double thing here. I'm kind of still narrowing it down, working on two different aspects of kind of the same thing. Technically, I'm a senior and specialty move manager at this point. And so the idea of a senior move manager is that if somebody needs to go into assisted living, I go measure the space. I make a plan to figure out what they can take with them because most people take way too much for this new tiny little space. And then we get them moved and settled and go back and empty out whatever's they didn't take. And if that is throwing things away, donating them, selling them, sending things across the country to all the relatives, that kind of a thing. But then the other side of that is doing it not for seniors, but people that just don't have the time and they have the money to have somebody do that. And so this background of knowledge that I have plays really well into that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I really like to do, and this is kind of weird, but somebody's got to do it, right? When somebody passes away, that's such a huge job for the kids to go in and take care of all the stuff in the house. It's like a full-time job.
Oh, I bet.
They already have a full-time job, you know? And so I really love just to be hired to go in and find the treasures. That's my favorite part, is I always find things that we can sell and it helps pay for my service. That's really the fun of it. One time we found a woman's wedding ring that had been missing for years.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, you never know what you're going to find.
I think that's very interesting. I've had a friend, his parents passed away recently, and he said that was the hardest part was, you know, there's this emotional attachment to some of this stuff too. And then there's also an element of like, you're so busy. It's like, just get a roll off and let's just throw everything away because I don't care, you know?
Yes.
But it seems like to me, as you're talking, I'm thinking like, oh, this would be really beneficial to have like a trusted advisor to somebody who could go in there and like, you know, be like, hey, I think we could sell this stuff, and I think this stuff probably could be donated to Goodwill, and this stuff can go in the roll-off, you know?
Exactly, because part of the joy of that is knowing that somebody else is benefiting. Even, you know, if they're still alive. It's often difficult to get people to donate things if they've had them for a really long time. But one example is somebody had these really amazing historic portraits of family members. They didn't know who the family members were anymore, but they were really large with really big, heavy frames that were hand carved. They were beautiful. Yeah. And they didn't want to get rid of them, but they had to because it just wasn't going to work in their next stage of life. But the person that bought them was moving to a castle in Denmark and took them, and they're hanging in a castle somewhere.
That's cool.
So they have this whole other life that somebody's really enjoying them.
That's interesting. Yeah, or you see like a lot of cool, I've seen some really cool vibey restaurants that have really interesting framed photos and things like that. I know my wife's grandma, she has all these like plate photos from like the Civil War, you know, it's like where the image is like taken on the plate, you know, and so, but it's like they're not displayed and we don't even know who this person is, but they have a cool vibe to them. So you could imagine that, you know, they could live on somewhere in someone's eclectic, you know, vision for art or whatever that might be, you know?
Yeah. And the other thing that's really interesting about it is, you know, Colorado is so much newer than the East Coast. Things have different value in different parts of the country. True. So here, that's really ancient. In the East Coast, people probably have them. They're not that rare, you know? So there's a lot of that to it, too.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So what's next for you? I mean, what are you focusing on? What do you, like, how do you plan your day? What time do you put towards networking and kind of working on the business? And then, you know, what are you doing as far as kind of your day-to-day?
My schedule with clients kind of dictates my overall schedule. And so just like any other business, it has ebbs and flows. And sometimes that's all I'm doing is, you know, working at people's houses and taking in a crew and getting stuff emptied out and, you know, all that part of it. But then on the quiet times, I'm just really trying to build the business one, you know, building block at a time. So as I get more focused, I'm figuring out what kind of networking I need to do. Like, my next step is to visit funeral homes because those are the people that get asked the question, how do I get help with this? And you know how you're saying all your life experience plays into that. When I was in 7th grade, we took a tour of a mortuary.
Oh, interesting.
That was crazy. When you're in 7th grade, that's a lot. But my mom used to do pre-sales for a cemetery. And so I was kind of exposed to that world. I honestly have been so fortunate. I don't have anybody in my life that's died that I've been close to. So I shouldn't be familiar with this. It should be a little intimidating, but it really isn't because I do have these other exposures that are more on like the business side of it. And then I'm also doing a lot of touring of senior living facilities. And that's interesting because I'm calling them as a business professional and saying, I'd really like to take a tour of your facility. I work with seniors. I want to know, you know, if I can refer them to you, if it would be a good fit. And then I get in there and listen to what they have to say to me as a professional. And then I say, and by the way, my parents are looking for senior living. And so that, which is true. they're not necessarily looking in Colorado, but I wish they were.
Yeah.
So I get that other aspect of it too. So
yeah, it's like you're learning, and there's like education. It's kind of like interesting.
And I really get to see people's true colors, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think if I just called and said, hey, I want to take a tour because my parents might want to live here, it would just be all salesmanship.
Yes, yeah.
And I kind of need them more than they need me at this point.
Yeah.
So I don't want to feel that way, you know? So I get both sides.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, I'm excited to kind of continue to see your journey and,
Thank you.
you know, follow you and see where you are. And then I'll be like, I knew her when.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. But one of the coolest things about the networking group that we go to is because it's successful people, they have really opened up my eyes to the possibilities and taught me to think bigger. That is like the biggest thing that I've gotten out of that group so far. Yeah,
thinking big. I think that limiting mindset. So many people have only gotten so far in their lives and they think like, okay, this is the peak, you know, this is good. But then it's like, oh, wow, you know, like there's more. There's, you know, like you have to open up your mind and think of all the possibilities that like I can go further than I've ever gone before. And so, yeah, being a part of a group where there's people, you know, you hear these stories of, oh, when I sold my third company, I'm like, you sold a third company? Like, what the heck? You know, it's like, how do I even sell one?
When they sold that first one, then they had money to start the second one. That's the thing. They're not starting it on a shoestring.
Yeah, exactly.
But I remember in that group one day, I was telling everybody what I did, and somebody yelled from across the room, "Is that a franchise?" And I was like, "Oh, it could be."
Right, yeah.
And then another thing was I had gone in thinking, oh my gosh, if I could just borrow $10,000, how different my business could be. And then somebody before me said $10 million. It was like $10 million.
Yeah.
Like it never even occurred to me that was a reality for a small business to be that into it.
Right. But I think that's why it's important too to get yourself around other people who have been to extreme places and can really open your mind to like the possibilities of, you know, what's, and that's a great group. If anyone's interested, it's called Faith Driven Entrepreneurs. And they also have Faith Driven Investors and a bunch of different, and it's global. It's like a global organization. And so if you have like a faith background, and want to be around other business leaders and thought leaders, like, you know, go check out their resources. Just Google like Faith Driven Entrepreneur. They have a lot of great content, and it's been a cool group because again, you're around like-minded people who, you know, have similar goals and kind of believe the same thing, and so that's been really good. So, what do we got here? Your jar opener?
Yeah. My jar opener is a big push. Most of my clients are seniors, and they really like the little knick-knacky things, which is kind of goes against the organizing because you don't want them to have more knickknacks, but I want them to have knickknacks with my name and number on it. The other one, I just ordered fridge magnets. Okay. Every senior citizen has the side of the fridge filled with their contact people. Yeah. So, you know, you really got to just have to focus on what do your clientele use. Yeah.
Jar openers. So where can people connect with you if they wanted to hire you or learn more about your business?
Well, my website is coloradoorganizeit.com. And I am always open just for a chat. Like, even if you just have random questions about where do I start? Where do I buy containers? How do I figure out how to, any of it? Like, what, are there any good apps for figuring out how much things are? I am more than happy just to share free advice. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's not all about the earning money. You know, some of it's just about being able to help people.
Yeah. And a lot of times I found is when I help someone without expecting anything back, I receive. So it's always
all
a
the
win-win.
Time. Yeah. You cannot bless people without being blessed. It's impossible. Yeah. There's even an episode of Friends about that.
Nice. Well, awesome. Karen, thank you so much for being on the Friday Habit and sharing your journey and story. And I just hope that this finds the right people and encourages them to kind of take that next step, that if they're afraid to go off and do their own thing or take that first leap of faith, that this will kind of push them over the edge, saying, you know what, like, you can do it. You're, you know, like, you have what it takes within you to be successful, and you're not so far from where you want to be.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks
so much. Yeah.